I haven't been doing okay lately. I know that. I don't know how to get over my brother's death. But just because I'm depressed and mourning doesn't mean I didn't see what I saw last night. I've been visiting my brother's grave for the past 4 months now. Ever since he died, I just haven't figured out what to do with myself. We used to be the brother-sister duo that would make music together and perform at parties for our friends, or really just anywhere. We had been singing and dancing together since we were 6 years old. At first, it was just for fun. Then we did it for real at parties and began making money. About 4 months ago, we were at a party and my brother went with some of his friends to go get more drinks. Well, I didn't know that his friend had already been drinking. They had gotten in a car crash and he had died on the way to the hospital. Listen, I miss him so much every day that I go out to his grave since it's just a 15-minute walk, and I feel at peace when I sit there with him. I tell him about my day and cry to him, wishing that he hadn't gone with his friend that day. I went to his grave last night because I simply couldn't sleep. I snuck out of the house and went to the graveyard to be with him. I did this every now and then when I couldn't get to sleep because being there, well, it helps. I know he really isn't there, but it helps ease the pain a little just being around him. When I hopped the fence, I heard something scurry away from one of the headstones. It must have been a raccoon or something. I walked past the larger memorials to my brother's grave and sat with him. I cried in my hands, wishing he was there with me. I looked up and saw something on the gravestone. About 6 rows down. It was dark, so all I could see were its eyes. They were yellow and seemed to have a very odd glow. The moon wasn't out, and it was typically dark in any cemetery. The only way I knew how to get in was by using my phone's flashlight. I picked up my phone and turned it on and pointed it towards the eyes. When I did, that's when these eyes moved up, and I could see a faint outline of shoulders, arms, legs, and what appeared to be a snout. Whatever this was that I was looking at was not human, and it definitely was not a raccoon. It moved around from the headstone and began walking towards me. I ran and hid behind the headstone and turned off the light on my phone. I held my breath, trying to stop myself from crying. But the more I did, the more I could hear it breathing. I heard it walking closer to me. I peeked around the side of the headstone to find it looking down at me, just 1 row across. Its eyes were still glowing a yellow, and I could see that it had dirt and grass all over its mouth, with what appeared to be bloodstains, as it had just gotten done eating something. It growled at me, and I was going to run until it looked back over its shoulder and began bolting past me. I quivered in fear until I saw the light from a flashlight searching the area. It was a man calling out and looking for anybody who may have broken in. It was probably security. I mean, do cemeteries even have security? I don't know. So I stayed there and waited until he walked past me to run back over the fence and hide in the alley of the nearby building. When I saw he left, I ran home, hoping I wouldn't run into that beast that I saw in the cemetery. I don't know what it was or what it was doing there, but I know now that I can't go there after dark anymore. Hey, what lurks beneath? I thought I would share this story only with you. I only very recently found out that stories like this were real, and not just some made-up campfire stories designed to scare people. My buddy swears to me that this did happen to him, so I'll tell you what he told me, and you can determine or not if you think it was real. My friend was always one of those camp kids. You know, the ones that went every year and had very specific friends he only knew from camp and that he only saw during camp. When he was 13, he went to a camp designed for teens and saw some of the same friends year after year, but he also continuously met new people. One of the girls he had met, he had a crush on, and tried to be with it any time he could. He said he tried to get into the same group as she was, but never had a chance. He either missed the sign-up times for the groups, or couldn't get into some of the events because they were only for older kids. She was 16, so she was allowed to stay out later than he was. That didn't stop him though. One night, he had snuck out to go see her when he saw that she was out hiking on a night trail with a few of her friends, whom they had also all snuck out together. He said at the time he felt too much like a stalker, so stopped following her for the time being, until shortly after she disappeared from view. Her and her friends came running back, all in a panic, frantically freaking out, who happened to run right into one of the counselors who was walking by. Puzzled and confused as to why this girl and her friends were walking a trail, unattended and out late, going off on the counselor, freaking out, claiming that they were just attacked and nearly killed from a half-man, half-beast roaming the woods at night. The counselor nearly dismissed their claims and called it preposterous and claimed that they had been watching too many scary movies. But the girl and her friends still insisted that this was truth. They were indeed punished for being out late without any sort of supervision and were told to go back to their cabins. This kind of freaked my friend out and made him go back to his cabin as well. After that, things for the next few days were pretty normal. But then my friend recounts that after a couple or so days, even the counselors and staff began acting abnormal. They acted more skittish, more on edge, like they knew something but couldn't say anything about it. It was the strangest thing, he said. You could see it on all of their faces. They were afraid, and they were all of a sudden extremely adamant about people not going out of their cabins after dark, even as far as pulling in a large meeting between the entire camp and us, saying that there was a new strict curfew, and everybody was to be locked in their cabin as soon as night fell, which was really weird. So after this, a few more nights goes by, and my friend still doesn't really get much of a chance to talk to this girl that he has a crush on, right? So, one of these nights, he himself has a chance to see the same thing that she saw, or what she believed she saw. It was around 1 a.m, and campers were still allowed to leave their cabin to make short trips to the restroom, which was only about 50 to 70 feet away from the cabin. Well, he had his flashlight with him, and on his way to the small bathroom, he had heard what sounded like footsteps following him. When he shined his light, of course, in traditional Hollywood monster movie sense, nobody was there, which he thought he was being pranked. That is until he heard movement in the bushes. And then, out from the bushes in front of the bathroom, stepped out what he would describe to me as a living werewolf in the flesh. He said this thing looked just like you would see it in the movies. Everything down to a T. Down to the way it looked, its claws, its body. When telling me this, he looked me right in the eye and told me if there is ever such thing as a real-life transformation of a person into a werewolf, this was it, and it was in living flesh right there in front of him. Being so terrified, he dropped his flashlight and ran back to his cabin, where all the other boys in there teased him and made fun of him for what he saw, even though he swears by it, and he swears it was the truth. Safe to say he didn't end up really sleeping much that night, and he could have swore that he heard this thing pacing and walking around the cabins. And then just a few days after that, things got even more strange when they decided to close camp early for the summer. They never gave an official or exact reason to why they were closing it down, but everybody was required to leave and go home. Yes, it was a very strange year, and my friend believes it was all attributed to that beast that was wandering around, and that the camp host and everybody else knew about it, which is why they pulled the plug and decided to cut camp early that year, in hopes of hopefully keeping campers and teens alive and safe. Normally, if anybody were to tell me a story like this, I'd laugh in their face and tell them what a good ghost story they made up. But I don't know. My friend is a very stern and serious kind of guy. He doesn't like bullshit, and he doesn't like making stuff up. So when he tells me something like this, I see no reason for him to make this up and tell me. He has nothing to gain from it, and even his expression on his face, his body language, his emotion, The way he retells me the story, it just rings as a traumatic experience for him. Anyway, I'm just relaying his experience to you because I thought you might find it interesting, since you seem to have a lot of stories about werewolf-like creatures.